an immense practical advantage: clarity in the midst of confusion. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Having only one eye means much more perception than others who are unable to see altogether. In this midst of widespread ignorance, what would provide a huge practical advantage? Well, any perception that other people don't have could be a huge advantage. At the very end of this content, I'm going to make reference to a clarity about economic patterns. But I'm going to talk about a lot of different things first. For people who misinterpret some pattern, mislabel it, confuse one thing for another thing, that can be troublesome. If it's an economic trend and somebody invests in real estate with a tremendous amount of speculation and borrowing, and they do so based on certain presumptions, and then it turns out that their presumptions about what is going on are inaccurate presumptions. The whole model of their expectations, their model of what's going on and how things work, if that's inaccurate, let's say somebody thinks that there's currency inflation going on. Well, if there's the perception that there's currency inflation going on, and that's what people begin with as their presumption, and they look for evidence that would support that, and they tend not to necessarily even question what currency inflation would be. They start with the presumption and go and look around and try and sort out, is that what's going on or not? Or maybe they don't even question it. Maybe they just go and sort for evidence that that particular presumption is what's going on. So if you don't understand the term inflation or anything about economics, I apologize for distracting with that. This is a much more general comment as far as clarity and confusion and the advantage of clear perception when it's really distinctive or even unique. So if others do not perceive a particular reality at all, such as if they do not have the capacity to see, then accurate perception of that reality could provide a huge practical advantage, right? Like having night vision goggles when it's dark. There's just a whole bunch of information that would be helpful. Being able to have excellent hearing, being able to see colors. For if everyone else is colorblind and you can perceive colors, well, that could be advantageous, right? So here's a simple example. This is in regard to building a puzzle. You can see some pictures of puzzles if you're looking along at the blog post. Have you ever built a jigsaw puzzle? Well, didn't it help to have a picture of how the puzzle would look when it was completed? Like the box top of the puzzle? Didn't it help to use that as a guide, as a point of reference, as a model of how what part of the what parts will go together and how, right? If you've made a puzzle, it's simple enough. You recognize that having a picture of the completed puzzle, especially if it's hundreds of pieces, that can be very helpful. So what if there were a group of people who all had the same puzzle, and there was a race to build the puzzle the fastest, but only one participant in the race had a picture of the completed puzzle? Would being able to see that picture give that participant a practical advantage in the race? Of course it would, right? Or what if all the puzzle pieces were facing down, like bunch of people have the same puzzle, right? And they're in a race. All of them are working with that exact same puzzle, and all of the puzzle pieces are facing down with that solid brown or beige backing of the cardboard showing. And only one person knew to turn them over to even see the colors of the pieces. Other people are just trying to fit them together based on the shapes of the puzzle pieces. Someone else, they may not have the box top, but they turn over the pieces and they look for similar colors and they put similar colors together and try and fit them together. Would that give them an advantage? If they knew that it was a puzzle and they dealt with puzzles before, they might see the plain colored siding of the puzzle pieces and realize, well, if I turn them over, there might be something that would help me to know, is this the part of the dog, or is this the part of the green part of the puzzle? And there could be more than one green part, but it can be much faster to look at the color. Again, similar to what I was saying before about being colorblind or being able to see colors. So would being able to see the colors of the puzzle pieces help someone to match the different puzzle pieces together to build the puzzle faster? Well, of course not. So building puzzles is not especially important. As I had mentioned before, we're going to eventually make reference to economic patterns and correctly identifying them. I'm actually not going to get into any detail about that. That's something that is valuable to some people to know clearly what is probable, what is likely to be amongst those least surprised, to recognize most quickly what's actually going on. So building puzzles quickly isn't especially important. So building puzzles at all, isn't especially important. So building them quickly isn't especially valuable in a commercial or financial or practical economic way. However, if a team was assembling some furniture, would it make a difference how quickly the team completed the process? Or if a team was constructing a building together, or constructing a bridge or a vehicle, could it make a difference how quickly the team completed the process? Not even addressing questions of accuracy, just presuming that the results are just a matter of which one's faster or slower. Is a faster result sometimes favorable? Could having an accurate map help you to quickly reach a destination if you're traveling? Could having a translator help you to understand a foreign language? Again, these are all very, very simple examples. With an accurate map, there is the advantage of relevant knowledge. In the absence of the assistance of a map, there's no advantage. And we can call that ignorance. It's normal not to have a map, right? That's fine. Different people could have different maps, different qualities of maps, different accuracies of maps, maps that were easier to use. One map might be in a little electronic device. One might be a big paper map or an atlas that have to, figure out what page do I need to be on and all that. So there's all these different kinds of maps. There's having no map. Having no map would just be ignorance, or the absence of a map. They may, when I say ignorance, somebody may actually be familiar with the terrain, of course. That's very helpful too, right? Someone could have a map, and ignorance would just mean the absence of knowledge that would be relevant, as in practically valuable, help you to achieve a result faster, maybe. So an awareness of even the possible existence of knowledge that would be relevant is the awareness of ignorance. In other words, if I know that I could have a map, or I could have a scout or a guide or somebody who would help me to more efficiently produce the result of interest to me, well, then I'm aware of my ignorance, and that's related to humility. I might ask for assistance. I might seek out that information that would be useful. Humility can lead to curiosity. Let me back up. The awareness of ignorance is related to humility, and humility kind of naturally just leads to curiosity, which can lead to learning, and then wisdom, which provides an immense practical advantage. What do I mean by wisdom? Well, knowing what knowledge is relevant and using it. So, quickly, get a map and get to the destination. If there's no map, and you know that having a map would help, ask people for directions. Another revolutionary idea, right? But having a map is also very useful sometimes. So the advantage of relevant knowledge over ignorance is just an introduction to the topic of confusion, which is actually what we're exploring here. What if a person were building a puzzle but had the wrong picture of a completed puzzle as their guide? They were using the wrong box top. Well, that could lead to confusion. What if somebody was using a map to orient their travels, but the map did not fit the actual territory? Maybe it was 20 years old and just wasn't current and wasn't accurate. Or what if there were a team of people who were building a bridge together, but each of them was building a different bridge based on a different design? Well, would it be easier for them to work together if they were all using the same plan, or if they were all using different plans and expecting everyone else to be using the same plan that they were using, when in fact everybody's using different plans? Having no plan and just a bunch of people who agree that they're building a bridge together but they don't have any plan, well, that might not be particularly efficient either, right? So when there's a conflict between a map and the territory or the direct experience of perception, that can lead to surprises, which is not really any different than having no map at all. You're going to have surprises if you have no map. One simply learns about the territory as one proceeds, with surprises happening occasionally or even frequently. If you have a group of people who are building a bridge together and there is no plan, there are going to be occasional experiences of surprises. Why are you doing that? I didn't expect you to do that. Oh, you know, people are going to be aware of the absence of planning at some point. They're going to be surprised. Now that doesn't necessarily mean there'll be confusion, though. There's just an awareness of a lack of coordination, a lack of planning, a lack of organization. But there could be a conflict between a map and the territory, and that could be instantly recognized. And, oh, I'm surprised the map is inaccurate. There you go. Generally speaking, anyone who experiences a conflict between their direct experience and the information of a map will immediately recognize that they have an inaccurate map and simply discard the map. They would recognize that being surprised simply indicates ignorance, and they would humbly proceed with curiosity toward learning what is accurate and relevant. They might even update an old, inaccurate map, or simply create a new map or a new model, a new guide. So when there's the experience of a surprise without a humble recognition of ignorance, there may be no curiosity and no learning and no adaptation. If there's a team of builders all working together to build a bridge, but each one is using different plans or different instructions to guide their actions, they all could just be surprised at what the other people are doing and then humbly recognize their ignorance of how the other people are operating. It doesn't require an interpersonal conflict. It doesn't really require any confusion. They just, oh, I'm surprised that you're doing that. Let's talk about what to do. Let's work this out. Let's plan something. And how do they do that? Through language, right? They might even draw a design or a plan on the ground with, in the dirt or on a piece of paper. Sometimes paper can be much more efficient in communicating something than talking about it. They could even demonstrate something. But either way, organizing and coordinating their activities can make for the building of the bridge or whatever else to be much more efficient. So another possibility is that the builders would not recognize that their surprise is an indication of ignorance. They might notice that something is strange or weird or surprising, a few things, but they're busy. They're really going quickly. They're a little bit of preoccupied with something, and they don't recognize what is producing the conflict between their experience and whatever they had been expecting. We can call that confusion. It has to do with that background of distress and that background of preoccupation. I'll clarify how confusion is important in a moment. First, builders might even realize they're all using different plans and then argue or battle over which plan to use. That is not the personal experience of confusion. They just recognize they're using different plans, or some people aren't acting in accord with a particular plan, and arguing over which plan they should use isn't the personal experience of confusion. That's an interaction when they start to argue or fight. If they all know that they're all operating according to different plans, they could stop the building process and do something else besides build the bridge, such as fight over which plan to use. That would be interpersonal conflict. That's not confusion about why they're surprised. They're surprised at other people's actions because there's no coordination. There's different plans. That's not confusion. That's that recognition. And then how do you resolve that? Stop work in, or you create a kind of a passive-aggressive signal to the other people that interferes with what they're doing, or you just tell them, or you get in a fight with them. Just go attack them or whatever, and say, okay, you guys are building it wrong, and we gotta use force to get your attention. Yell at them, throw a rock at them, etc., etc. All those things are fine. Those are not confusion. They may work very effectively or not very effectively, but they're not confusion. They're not mistaking their own plan as the one that the others are using. They recognize the other people are not using the same plan. There's a lack of coordination to the planning. Or maybe there's no plan at all. There's just not enough clarity amongst the different team members, not enough training or whatever about what to do and when to do it, and so on. So conflict is not the personal experience of confusion. People may be confused, and people may conflict with each other, but the personal confusion is distinct from the interpersonal conflict. So how is confusion important? Just as someone with relevant knowledge has a practical advantage over those who are frequently encountering new surprises over and over and over again, having to learn over and over and over again. If something's familiar, they have a plan, they have an idea how it's going to go, they have somebody guiding them through it, that can be very helpful. And someone with relevant knowledge has a practical advantage over people who are frequently being surprised. Similarly, there is a practical disadvantage to being confused, to being preoccupied or distracted, and not recognizing that the surprises have to do with a lack of consistency between expectations and what's actually happening. I don't notice that my expectations are wrong. I just notice something is inconsistent, incongruent. But I don't necessarily recognize that my map is wrong, or that my model or my instructions are wrong. At first, I may simply recognize something is not working, something is wrong, but I may not know what it is. That doesn't necessarily mean there will be confusion. You can see that confusion and ignorance are quite related. But confusion would correspond to a lack of efficiency or effectiveness. If there's a bunch of people all following different instructions and none of them are really aware of the fact that there are all different instructions, at some point there's going to be a lack of efficiency noticed, and at some point, potentially, someone's going to recognize there's confusion going on based on different models of the larger process. So confusion can lead to blame and contempt, such as condemning the territory for failing to conform to the map, or condemning the source of the map, the person who provided the map or made the map. Or people can get angry at each other and blame each other for not coordinating. Well, if nobody's coordinated, one person could blame another for the lack of coordination. Well, I expected somebody else to coordinate. I don't want to coordinate. I'm angry. I'm blaming. They may not want the responsibility of coordination and efficiency, producing efficiency. They may actually want to have the experience of anger and conflict. So, people may often unintentionally provide expectations to others that are inaccurate, sometimes even knowing that those expectations are inaccurate and will lead to surprises and inefficiency for those other people receiving that communication. That is part of competition and conflict. Similar to the action of an athlete to begin going one direction and then suddenly reverse direction or do a fake. The possible advantage from misleading a competitor is tremendous. The best athletes not only are skilled at misdirecting or faking out their competitors, but are also skilled at quickly recognizing when their competitor is attempting to mislead them. So, we're going to review here in a moment an extremely common example of how people intentionally mislead other people so as to cultivate a practical advantage over the targets of the misdirection, of the people being misdirected. This is an example of how adults may systematically, routinely, ritually mislead children as part of the process of influencing the behavior of the children. And this is in regard to the way that the story of Santa Claus is popularly used. That'll be in the next section.